Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. We're back.
I'm loving it. That's a good one. Yeah, it's actually impressive that you can come up with these like 5 seconds before the spot. That's hard. I don't think I could do it. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm sipping my apricot lemon
Kombucha?
mood enhancer by Vibes. Today's podcast is brought to you by Vibes Enhancement. Brought with 100 milligrams of ashwagandha, L-theanine, L-tyrosine, redalia, elderberry, and red ginseng. You too can feel some vibes by drinking Vibes.
Mood enhancer. What is that?
Enhance
Sounds
your
like
mood.
ecstasy. It sounds like ecstasy. Are you drinking ecstasy?
Practically is actually, honestly. Ashwagandha, good Ayurvedic root known to dampen release of cortisol. L-theanine, a
Oh
natural
no.
compound found in green tea
Uh-uh.
that helps increase GABA.
We're slowly leaving.
L-tyrosine helps. I think that has something to do with like attention and dopamine. Anyways, it helps you relax.
Mm.
I need to relax because that's at the top of the phase.
Relaxation.
No, I don't know if that's the topic.
We went from motivation to relaxation. Let's see.
Ooh, I feel like something we've been talking about. Okay, actually, we gotta go there because we gotta go there. But
Mm.
I feel like a couple things we've been talking about lately is the concept of getting triggered. That's real.
Mm. Yeah,
But
that's a good one.
you have recently had a very big life event happen. Maybe one you look back upon as one of the most transformational times of your life. So, Gautam, would you like to talk to the one listener, that's my mom, about what? Just kidding, she never listens to shit. About what you went
The
through.
retreat was like meditation retreat.
Yes.
Um, Let me see. I want to say something that I haven't said because I've already, kind of said on but yeah, for a quick brief introduction, it was 10 days. Took a shuttle from Paris, went down south 2 hours to the middle of the woods. 10-day meditation retreat where you basically wake up at 4, sleep at 9. You're up for most of the time the sun is out, and you're alternating between group meditation, solo meditation, um, them teaching the technique at night, and like dinner and lunch and breakfast and walking in the forest. And so this is what I would say. I would say that in our day-to-day lives, so many things are happening all the time. Like even right now, my mind is like on X Games mode, where it's like I'm thinking about the podcast I recorded earlier than this. I'm thinking about what I need to do later. I'm thinking, my mind is just cluttered with past, future, past, future, past, future, and there is no time for present. It's like constantly alternating between what do I need to do versus what did I do already that I could have done better. And so in these 10 days was the first time where nothing is really happening to you. You're completely disconnected from the world. The most crazy thing that probably happens in a day is I saw some really cool spiders and they were doing some crazy stuff. You're just observing animals. And
Mm.
so like that's it. That's the only new sensation that's like entering your brain. So apart from that, you're simply just like the first 6 7 days for me at least, it was just like going through my entire past, going through my entire future, thinking about things. And by the day 6 or 7, you're kind of just over it. You've thought of everything, your mind is clear, and you're simply just now able to be present. I left that place, and probably the next day I wasn't able to get to that spot anymore because it's like
Mm.
the amount of things that we just don't even realize is leaving an impression on us throughout a day is like in thousands, especially if you're living in a city where like you're constantly hearing something, you're seeing something, you're feeling something. It's like all your sensations are just literally on 100% for an entire day. And it's like, how are you supposed to function with all of that? And so um I would say coming from that, the big thing that it has stuck with me for, I mean, it's only been 2 weeks, but I feel like a lot more acutely aware of when things make me upset, when, how things make me feel. And I can't necessarily, it still takes a little while. I guess like through the practice, eventually you're able to do it as soon as it happens. For me, it still takes like 5 10 minutes or an hour or, half the day, but I'm able to at least be a little more aware of what's happening, which connects us back to this concept of getting triggered. But yeah, thanks for asking.
So is it sort of like because you didn't speak and you weren't talking to anybody, you couldn't externalize you didn't go outward in the world, you were kind of forced to go more inward. And through
Yeah.
going inward, you kind of became very familiar with like all the things happening to you like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah, it's like, and the most fascinating thing is like when you're in it, you're like, God damn, I want to get out of here. And then you get out and
mm,
then you're like, oh man, I want to go back, and it's like,
mm,
I think that's like very telling of
life.
just like life in itself, like,
Always trying to be somewhere else.
and that's something I've really, I learned a lot even being there, just like really trying to fathom you don't have to be somewhere else. You can be exactly where you are. And I've been having a really hard time with balancing that and my ideas on dating and things like that, just like figuring out like, damn, I really don't want to need someone or something else. I was hanging out with this girl yesterday, and like I was like, how I've been telling you about like the hand holding thing that I do. But yesterday I was really thinking about it, and I was like, you know what, like I don't need that, like I don't really need, like, it's just really tough to when you realize everything is in your brain and you don't, because it's so easy to function on, I'm not feeling good, let me change the outside world, when you're just like, damn, none of that will actually fix my problems, and I have to really turn inwards. It's like then you're just like, what do I do now? It's like
Mm,
you just
mm,
you're functioning in a different place that like I'm not prepared for. I don't know how to work inwards. I've gotten no training in that. We've learned quite well on how to change the external world, but I have zero training on how to change my inward state.
that's like, I feel like that idea right there is something that really is not talked about enough. I was having a conversation the other day with someone, and I think it's crazy how we spend most of our life, at least our young life, like in school, like um, getting an education, and we repeat a lot of the same things time and time. Oh, World War One, World War Two, fucking Stalin, and it's like things that I think are so important to us, like creating meaning, finding purpose, relationships. To me, the most important thing in the world, communication, um, your own mental state and dealing with that, mental health. These things I think are so much more fucking important than like, and maybe not, maybe in the grand scheme of things, knowing about World War II, but I personally think it is, than learning about those things. Yet I don't feel like anybody teaches us how to be in relationships properly, how to really communicate well, how to really construct meaning in our lives, and like how to deal with the anxiety and the monotony and this dopamine inducing society that we live in, and chasing all these ephemeral feelings. And we're tasked to do that. And that's kind of like our own individual journey that everybody has to go upon. And I think, something I'm realizing as I get older is that a lot of people don't go on that journey. A lot of people don't do their own education on how to better um, do these things. And it's really fucking hard because there's no like groundwork laid out for you. There's no like formal education on like, hey, this is how you communicate properly with another individual. This is how you communicate when you're upset. This is how you communicate when you're sad. This is how you communicate when you're happy. And this is a space for you to create how you want to communicate using all these tools that you've been given. Like, and yet all we do all day is communicate. Like there's nothing that teaches you like, hey, there's this whole inner verse that exists just like the outer verse. And just like we are explorers of the outerverse, the universe, space, other planets, we should be explorers of our innerverse, our inner selves, the constellations and cosmos within us. And here's how to do
Mm,
that.
it's a good analogy, yeah. And I think, so one thing, I think everything you said is literally exactly what I want to do with the education space, and a lot of my work is focused on what you just said in the last few minutes. And so one thing that I've seen is, so now there's a shift towards focus on mental health now. But I think like how it's even that is approached is through like, oh, here's another textbook. Read this. Oh, you can learn about this condition and that condition. Do you have these symptoms? This is how you deal with it. But it's still like so intellectualized. I think like as long as it stays at that level, it won't come down to like the practical level. So I think today what the conversation was about is we were talking about art with in the previous podcast, and she was basically talking about how, look, you can intellectualize art, but at a certain point, you also have to like learn how to deal with your own experience. So try different things. Don't just like read a book and it says this is the best way to communicate like this and just do it. learn like different methods and different techniques and try them yourself and then see what works for you. And that ability to like experiment and figure out what works for you, I think is super key in any of these things. Because even if you learn all these things, but you simply read a book and it tells you how to do it and you just follow it, then I think you'll just have a different problem. It still won't be
Mm,
like through your own experience, because at the end of the day, that's so key, you know?
Yeah, I feel like as we move into these higher education based spaces, a lot of what people draw from is very scientific and objective and wants to be, especially when you're coming from like spaces that aren't hard sciences, there's this insecurity that it has where it wants to prove itself to be objective.
Yes.
And so what it does to accommodate that is that it sort of removes all subjectivity and feelings and anything that is phenomenological instead of something that is measurable or objective. And I think a lot of times that ends up taking the beauty out of these spaces because that's where they originated from. Like we shouldn't make them things that they aren't. And for example, this is so like happening in psychology so much. It's like so many people in the psychology space now need to back up. And I'm not saying things shouldn't be well validated, but you know, things need to be. It's becoming so neuroscience based and physiologically based. And instead of like getting down to kind of what a lot of the like forefathers of psychology was dealing with human experience, dealing with like day to day experience, because that's a lot harder and messier to deal with. But I think that I think that what art does really well is it puts our own experience as the forefront of what matters over anything else. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't give you anything. It says, what does this mean to you? And a
Mm.
lot of people don't like that because it's harder, it's messier, but it's a reflection of the messiness that we have as humans within ourselves. And I think to
Yes.
run away from that is to run away from our own humanity. Like that's something that we should embrace, and it's something that we should um, provide more of. Like I don't know, like art isn't. I mean, especially like being an arts major, I guess philosophy, whatever. Like I feel like a lot of people, a lot of people think, oh, well, what is philosophy? It's all subjective, anyways. I never understood why that is a discredit. Like
Mm.
people use that to discredit things. They're like, oh, that's just subjective. I'm like, okay, why is anything subjective less valuable? Like when did
Mm.
objectivity become so much more valuable than objectivity? Because at the end of the day, everything is subjective to you, bitch. Like,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. Your
sorry, like we're
entire
subjective beings.
experience.
Like,
Yeah.
why are we invalidating our humans? Like we're trying to become like, why don't we say, hey, that's subjective. That's why it's so amazing.
Mm. Yeah. And I guess like that's like what really a few of the bigger picture things I took away, which is funny. They are still all intellectual things that I took away, because I think experientially I didn't get as deep as many of the other people there were. And I think
Mm. For the
one of the
meditation.
yeah, like but one of like the core philosophies of that practice is like, if you're having a harder time getting to those deeper states, it's because you're like working through more things than people who may have already worked through them or whatever, or in
And
different
what do you mean
places
by
in
deeper
life.
states?
Like, so it's a good question. So basically, I'm trying to like put myself back in that environment. Be like, all
Uh,
right, what would it? No, it's the idea of like, I think and I could completely be butchering this, which is why I don't want to, really speak on it, because I'm not sure if what I understood was right, but this is what I understood from it. I think the pure process of the entire thing is like you dissolve your ego in that process, and so whatever
mm,
you consider to be you no longer becomes that, and you start to realize you're more like just this like impermanent collection of atoms or whatever. And so I think some people got, really felt things that showed that sign of. So the idea is, so the technique is you're focusing on your sensations, and you get into smaller and smaller parts.
mm,
And so you can just feel the sensations that you're constantly feeling just under your nose. Or once you move your
mm,
focus to a different area of your body, you can feel sensations just there. And so some people were able to feel that throughout their entire body. And so the idea is there's no thing that's called the subconscious. So basically what the philosophy of that thing was that, like, oh, anything that happens will first actually register in your body as sensations. And since you're not aware of them, then when your mind actually processes it, you think it's the subconscious. But what it is your body is much more immediately aware of anything that happens, and then only do you like your consciousness or whatever the part that you're conscious of processes it. So by being truly aware of all your sensations, you can actually understand the subconscious, and you realize that you can pretty much understand why everything that's happening to you is happening. I think something like that. And so I think some
Mm,
people were able to get into deeper and deeper of those understandings and states through their own practice. While
mhm.
like for me, I don't think I necessarily understood those through my experiences, but I understood it through like the philosophy, like what they explained through it,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. But
Interesting.
so but to say that I forgot what were you saying earlier? Oh yeah, so like back to this science versus subjective. I mean yeah, objective versus subjective. It's so important to just yeah, really just fully experience whatever you have. It doesn't have to and you said something really good earlier. Do you remember when you were talking about how a lot of times we try to push our own narrative onto the world so that it like aligns and it matches? Do you remember a couple of days ago you said something like that?
Oh, is it sort of that idea of um, everyone's kind of trying to prove that they're not crazy?
Yes.
And so, like, at the end of the day, I think a lot of ex- externalization in any type of way, whether that's physical expression, emotional expression, verbal expression, is us taking this like mess, this jumbled mess within us, and trying to order it outside of ourselves. And a lot of the times, the translation between the inner self and the outside world is messy, just like any type of translation is messy. And so, what we try to do all the time is we create this narrative and we try to get people convinced of our narrative. We try to make people believe our narrative is right and it's correct and it's valid ultimately because if the translation between my inner self and the outside world don't match, if the states between my inside self and the outside world don't match, I'm now crazy
Yeah.
because, for example, a lot of people who have really severe disorders, let's say schizophrenia, for example, their inside world is saying that, hey, there is a person next to me saying this, or there is a voice.
Mm,
And the outside world is saying, hey, that's not actually happening. And so a lot of times what I think we believe what craziness is just a lack of alignment between our inner world and the outer world. So
mm.
I think we're always trying to check that. And the only thing we can really use to check that is other people. And so we're constantly trying to convince other people that our inner world is valid such that we're not crazy, that the outside world can actually be valid. We're
But I
trying to
just
turn the
think what you're
subjective around.
saying is so woke that like it pretty much explains 95% of reason of why anyone even talks.
Mm,
Like I think like I really want to like take a deeper dive into why we communicate, and I'm pretty sure people have already done that. But I can think of a few reasons. I mean, one is to alert danger. I think that's like one where you're not trying to really like be like, well, I am a danger alerter. Like I don't think when that instant happens where you're like, run, no one's like, I want other people to perceive myself as such. Like I think that's
well,
one true maybe, but you know,
I something I think about is interesting with that type of stuff is which not to get we don't have to get too far onto that, but it's like those like bystander effect type things, 'Cause I feel like even
mm,
then, you see a fire and you're like, run, and no one else is running, and you're like, well, fuck, maybe there's something wrong with me.
yeah, yeah. I was just saying, like the instant to communicate that to
Yeah,
others,
yeah,
I don't think that particular moment comes from a place of like I want other people to think of me as such.
as
But I get
yeah,
what you're saying. But I was saying like for example, let's say we hang out for the first time.
hmm
I have such a hard time introducing myself to someone because I'm like, I am so acutely aware that everything I'm saying is to draw a picture out for you, you know?
hmm
Like,
hmm
even if we're talking about ideas, I feel like I still want to be like, oh, well, I'm a person who talks about these things. Or, it's still like, it's so hard to disassociate from that, especially the first time you meet someone. I feel like once you know someone for long enough, like, I'm not really trying to present myself to you as a certain type of way. You know me, like, I don't really care. But
hmm
it's like the first couple times you really have to like present yourself in such a way, and I which there's nothing wrong with that. And my point is not that that doesn't need to happen, but it's just like I know that nothing I say is something that I'm not. I don't. To me now, it feels like there's no point in it in some weird
Well,
way.
I feel like with your practice that you had those 10 days of silence and maximum self-awareness, maybe more self-awareness than you've ever had, most people ever have. I think the more you become aware of your ego, the more painful it becomes to kind of interact, because it's one of those things that's so habitual that it's hard to break from it. And it's really hard to like watch yourself doing these things, knowing that you're doing it for those reasons and kind of not wanting to be doing those things, but having it happen anyways. And the more
Mm,
aware you become, I feel like, of your ego, how it operates, how it sort of takes control at certain moments, the more painful it is to kind of exist on a day-to-day basis in situations that tend to evoke your ego more than others. It almost like you want to avoid that because you're just like, it's like embarrassing. It's like you're like watching yourself in a third
yeah,
person,
put
and it's
on a
like, ah,
show.
man,
Yeah,
exactly. It's like I feel like it's when you watch kids like sort of
try to act
try to
cool.
act hard or try to do something else. You're like,
Yeah,
dude, I know why you're doing this. Like you're trying
yeah,
to fit in, you're
yeah.
trying to look good. Like it's like secondhand embarrassment almost.
Yeah. And so really, I think the only way around it is you have to like you have to embarrass yourself. I think that's like there's something so powerful in like there's something, and I've always loved this. I've always loved doing what you're not supposed to do. I think like for that specific reason, because it's like the only way to, but I mean, okay, first there's one thing that you can be like the quote unquote rebel who's like, so you just conform to that thing. But I guess like what I'm trying to say is even breaking that norm, like even breaking the rebel norm, but like literally becoming such a unique individual that like no one can place any label on you, that they have to see you as a being. And like I've
Mm,
always been fascinated by that. I'm like, okay, well, I'm Indian. I can be good at math, but I can also do these other things. Okay, well, I can be in these professional spaces and I can also have colored hair. Or I can, it's like always
absolutely.
like just like juxtapose two characteristics that no people have never seen. And so no one can ever label you. They're just like, you are just what the heck? I don't even know.
Absolutely.
And that's the
Absolutely. No,
only
I
way you
love
can
that.
be, Like otherwise
Hmm.
people will always like minimize you to some sort of label. And I hate that's what I hate about this whole Democrat. Like I'm like a part of me actually I think sometimes takes opinions just because I'm like I don't want to be labeled as one more
Mm,
often. Just because I think that's enough. It's just all limiting things that people do for their own brains to function. Like, oh, this person has acted like this because they're a Sagittarius. Like whatever it is that they need to do to kind of make their world make sense. But it's like, if, yeah, when you're that one person who just doesn't fit into anything that they say, people have to reconsider their entire framework, you know?
well, I wonder if we can kind of relate this back to what we were talking about earlier, right? So there's this inner desire within you, right? It's like, hey, I'm a being. Like I'm a multifaceted, complex collection of characters, stories, feelings, thoughts, whatever. I'm not this or that. But the outside world is saying, hey, you're this. And so there's this strong need to like balance what's going on internally and externally, right? And so it's like a lot of, I think I was talking about this with you the other day. We care more about representations than reality. Like representations hold a bigger value in how we understand things than reality. For example, for anybody who might listen, um, I sprained my wrist not too long ago. And I just thought it was very interesting how when I was wearing my brace, people were like, oh, your wrist is fucked up. But if I didn't wear my brace, no one said anything. Even if they had previously seen me in my brace, they just assumed it was magically better. So I thought about what if someone wore a brace all the time, they didn't actually have a fucked up wrist. That would be more believable than someone having a fucked up wrist than
And not
someone
wearing one.
just knowing it, exactly, not wearing it, right? So the representation of things are more important because I think that's how we categorize things, whatever. So externally we try to represent ourselves to show the internal thing, like just like my bone hurts and I want people to know that, I represent that with the brace. Just like you internally feel like a really complex individual that people don't know, you try to represent that with having colored hair but also being in education spaces, doing that and also being in this. It's like trying to like create equilibrium between our internal state and our external state again.
That's a damn, yeah. It's cool that we can connect all these different things that we talked about throughout the week. No, that's so cool. Yeah, no, representations. I'm just trying to think, yeah, because then I'm doing the same thing that everyone else is doing. Even if you are trying to be a quote unquote complex being, it's like you're still also just trying to represent that. But I guess it just becomes harder and harder. Representing a complex being is harder than representing like a stereotype, you know?
Mm-hmm,
Like I'm the
mm-hmm.
cool guy, so I do X, Y, and Z. you know?
Right. Yeah, and it's like maybe that's where creativity comes into play too. Maybe everybody really does have a complex internal network, but it's like ultimately creativity and expression is the only thing that actually allows you to represent that in a way that feels correct.
So what do we do?
Drink these vibes, brought to you by vibes. I don't fucking know. This is the podcast where we ask a lot of questions and don't have a lot of answers. All right.
Man,
We gotta create another answers podcast when we're older.
that's like, here's the thing, right? I don't look, my life is just good. Like, what do I do now? Like, what do I do? Like, I don't understand. Like, what are we chasing? Like, I think there's just no point in chasing anything. So it's like, then what? I think that's like a hard question. It's like, if I'm so wired to chase, like, not wired biologically, but wired socially in many ways that, like, my whole life, it's always been like, you got to do this and this and this and this and this. It's like, dude, like, I'm good. Like, what do I do now? Like, I don't need much.
You know what I've been thinking a lot about lately
Mm,
is sort of how necessary it is to get to certain places to revert back to others. I think we really do think of growth as like this thing that is always moving forward. But I think that's the assumption that the place in which we started off was
is
bad.
worse. Yeah.
And I don't think it is. I think a lot of people talk about babies, kids, all that stuff is for all those types of I guess thinking like beings in that state, in that hyper creative, hyper explorative, hyper wonder filled, hyper open state. And I think, I don't know if you ever listened to that Nietzsche podcast I was telling you about, where he describes the camel, the lion, and the baby. And essentially he says like the goal of man or humanity is to become a baby.
Mm,
That's essentially what we're all trying to move towards. And he
which
says
is so
everyone's a
funny.
camel. Yeah, he says everyone's a camel. We are born into society with these weights that are put on us that we don't ask to carry. They're just kind of put on us, and that's how 90% of society operates. We're just camels, and no one actually takes off their weights. And he says people turn into lions, and lions are essentially people who completely reject society. You're kind of fighting this dragon. He calls it a dragon called thou shalt do Y, thou shalt do what Z. And you kind of reject that. But it's also just not practical to reject everything in society. But what he says is that the line is a very, very necessary step. Because only once you reject everything can you then actually build from nothing. Can you build from your own place?
Mm,
And that's how you become the baby, because then you're actually creating from nothing. And so maybe
the
so
baby?
much of the baby is this is where it all comes down to the baby. Like that name is actually hella woke. It's very Nietzschean. I feel like we think of these places that we have to go through like mentally and these experiences that we have to have that are so like we keep on thinking there's a place to go forward. I don't think we ever think of like, hey, maybe we have everything we need. And what this makes me think of that is that Zima Blue episode in Love, Death, and Robots. Like my quest for knowledge has brought me here. Like he has to become this insanely, he has to explore every part of
Yeah.
space. He has to become insanely smart. He has to do all that just to know that there's nothing else to look for. Like
Yeah.
sometimes we have to explore so much and do so much just to know that we don't need that. Like just to know that we had everything all along. But I think we like, oh, why can't I just realize that right off the bat? But I think it's important the only way to actually have that turn from intellectual to experiential is to experience everything such that you realize that you don't need it.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's going to be the lesson continuously as we go forward. The more and more we have, the more and more we find, we're just going to be like, this doesn't fulfill me. This doesn't fulfill me. We realize there's nothing more we
Yeah.
need.
Which is just, that's like the crazy part now. I'm just like, dude, I've actually, like, for my age, done a lot of things. Like, just like and none of it has fulfilled me. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's like it's like it's mind blowing, honestly. And I think the part that's mind blowing is just like when will my life become aligned to where, like, and so this was one of the big things. Like, I think I really think doing things for others, is one of those things that just feels so right to me. You know, like I not even on some like goodness level, no ethics involved from a selfish area, helping others for free just feels so good to me. You know, like I'm just like, ah, this is nice, you know, and like it's just crazy how look as long we live in a system where the healthcare is good if you're wealthy, but it's expensive, and so that's like one of the only places where when you know if you're okay with dying, then you don't really need any money. But let's just say you're not okay with dying and you want to definitely save some for good healthcare. That's like definitely the biggest expense you'll ever have in your life. If you wanted to live a really cheap life on it in a tent with making food every day, even hunting to make the food if you have to, like whatever. It's like you don't, it just I had a friend tell me that he needed like he was only going to retire after he had like 10 or 15 million dollars or something. And I was like, damn, like imagine like how like you know, like damn, like imagine how expensive your life would have to be if you're like, yes, I need $1 million per year to live. Like you really you may I don't even know how much you need, but it's much, 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 much less than that.
Ah man, it's just, and I feel like there's just so many people who, and including myself, like I'm not. I've been thinking a lot about how much I talk about this lately, but how much I'm also I suffer from this, but just don't have meaning that really matters to them. And I think so much of like what we do is us trying to like make the meaning that matters to us be valid. You know, like, oh yeah, this is right. But like, I was looking at the James Webb telescope picture that came out not so long ago, and how each little dot or
Yeah.
cluster is a galaxy, and then just thinking about the Milky Way galaxy and just how we're just one little part of that, and our sun is just infinitely bigger than we are than the Earth, and how we're
Yeah.
just infinitely smaller than Earth. And I really, really like looking at that picture
Hmm.
because find me the most altruistic, amazing, incredible person who has done the craziest shit. Find the perfect person, right? The
Hmm.
fucking champion of humanity, let's say. And dude, they just don't matter.
Yeah, yeah,
Like they
that's not
just do
exactly. It
not
doesn't matter.
fucking matter. Like
No
we want to
one.
be so popular for this like group of humans, and it's like becoming like the coolest ant. And it's just
Yeah.
like to the universe, like you're still a fucking ant, dude. Like, yeah, you're a little like bigger and faster, but like you're an ant. Like,
But like here, okay, so I have a question for you. Everyone says this, right? Okay, I would say there's three groups of people. There are people who don't even believe this. So I put my mom and some of those other people, like they don't even really like think this thing. I would say that's a small portion. I would say majority of the people, what you just said, they say it out loud. They say
mhm,
we are small, we're just an ant, we don't matter. But
mhm,
like their lives do not align with that statement at all. And then I would say the smallest group of people who say that and have an aligned life with that. And I would say their life isn't aligned in that because they think they have no meaning, they do nothing. It's I would say oftentimes it's the opposite. It's like through that realization, they do amazing things with their life, with the realization that none of it matters. But I would say like, how do you think? I mean, both of us as well. I feel like we're probably in that middle group. I don't think either of us live our lives as if like we've truly embodied the fact that nothing matters. You know, like I
mhm,
still
mhm.
to some extent think things like you know like the way I act still thinks
Oh, for
some things matter.
sure,
And
for
so it's
sure,
like how does one go from the middle group to that last step?
dude. I don't. I think that's. I feel like that's where you and I are both at. I would say like you are really diving into that a lot deeper than I am. And so maybe I think honestly you probably have more to say about that than I do, because I feel like you're someone who really takes that like things don't matter, or we're insignificant, we're literally just little specks of dust. Like I hear you say this all the time, like, dude, we're gonna fucking die, who cares? And that's like that seems to be almost one of your catchphrases, and it's a fucking great one. And so I don't know, how do you think we move from that space to the space of truly embodying? Because it's also a really dangerous space to be in, which is like it's hard to not move into that in a way that's like destructive. And then the question becomes, okay, so what if it is destructive? Like respects of dust, like who gives a fuck? Like it I don't know. It's always a hard balance because once anything becomes possible, then it's just like, well, I don't really like what's stopping me from just like literally doing what I, because then what becomes my driving principle? Like this purposeless purpose.
Yeah, that's a good question. And so the Buddhist, like I mean the Monastery talked a lot about this. It's like, look, like when you don't have an ego, why not kill yourself? Which I think is a great question, right? Like both, why shouldn't I destroy the world and why shouldn't I destroy myself? I think are such
Mm.
important questions that we don't talk enough about.
Huge.
Yeah, like I mean, the fact that not enough, I don't hear the conversation of why we shouldn't kill ourselves more often is like sad.
Dude,
You know,
people are.
like
I love that Camus called suicide the most important question in philosophy.
yeah,
Like he starts off his book, The Myth of Sisyphus, like pretty much, why should we or shouldn't we kill ourselves? Like, and then he says that is the most important question one can ask ourselves, and it's real because it's like, dude, why
yeah, because
not?
why suffer? Like why suffer? Like honestly, life sucks. Like is
It
the
does
pleasure
in so
like?
many ways.
And the thing is, a lot of the people that I met at the thing, it was just kind of funny because a lot of them were old, and I had said something at the last day when we were talking because they talked. One of the things that constantly we talked about is they would keep saying life is miserable. Like the guy who
Mm.
taught the thing, he was like, life is miserable, and you do these things to kind of escape the suffering of life. And I said something at the end. I was like, I don't really agree with that. I don't find my life to be that miserable. And then all like the old heads are like, how old are you? And then I was like, I know. And then they're like, okay, well, I see. But I really think there's something to that,
No.
like in your 20s, your 30s, life is good. But like
And in a lot of ways, it just gets harder. Like I was
it
talking
gets
with someone
infinitely, like
yesterday.
not even like linearly, like yes, infinitely.
And yeah, and I was talking to someone yesterday, and I was looking at all this. I was looking at the stars, looking at the galaxy. I was really like looking at the Milky Way galaxy, and I was just like, man, like I'm gonna be at my brother's funeral one day. Like, man,
Or him
I'm
at
gonna be like,
yours.
what? Or him at mine, which like,
Yeah.
fuck. Or yeah, he'll be at mine. I'm being in the casket, like just like vibing out, and or yeah, I'll be at
Man,
my
I don't even
sister,
want to
she'll
think
be at
about
mine.
that, man. That's
No,
crazy.
but it's there's a
Yeah, it's
lot of
real.
suffering coming. There's a lot of
Yeah.
suffering coming.
Like
Like
so
really,
much, bro.
really
Like
hard
so
things to
much.
do.
Like
Like
so
really, really hard
fucking
things to
much.
do.
And it's there. It is all waiting to happen. Like either I'm going to go through it or I'm going to put others through it. That's it. You
And
know?
that's it's a fact of reality.
Yeah,
It's
that's
one
a
of these two facts that we have is that we're gonna suffer, or the people we love are gonna suffer immensely.
yeah. And
Someone's
so
suffering.
and so the question is just like, why go through it? And
Absolutely.
like we have to answer that. Like, come on. Like we can't just live in this like, oh, like it's selfish. What like, okay. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
I don't
because the
know.
people you care about are gonna be hurt. Like, yes, okay. But at the end of the day, we're like inherently really selfish beings. Like, um, uh, I don't think if you cannot find meaning and purpose in your life, then giving within me and giving me meaning and purpose that is outside of me to keep me here. I don't think it's like giving me an external like dart to hit like an internal thing. I'm just like,
Yeah.
okay, like I don't know if like being around for like my brother or my mom is enough to keep me here. Like
Enough.
that's not a good life for me.
Exactly.
That's just like a life where I'm
Exactly.
hanging on because like I don't want to hurt people, which is like me living for like fear.
Yes. And like, I ask my parents this a lot of the times, which like, I mean, the conversation just kind of silly, but like, I'm like, why suffer? I always ask them like, why are we doing this? And they say like, my mom personally like always says there's so much to enjoy in life. Why would you want to miss out on that? Which I think is like the typical response. If it's not like, why would you want to hurt others? Like there's so with all the suffering, there's also so much joy. But it's like if you just like don't care about any of it. But okay, here's the thing though. Even though I'm saying all of this, I am honestly such an optimist. You know what I mean? Like I really believe in life. Like I'm saying all
Mhm.
this, and I think other people would actually listen to this and like either feel depressed or actually kill themselves. Like
Mhm.
I would say the last piece of hope I have left is like I'm not killing myself. If I lose that, I
Mhm.
will. You know what I mean? Like that. The only thing that's stopping me from doing this is just like genuine hope that like there is something there.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's the
Yeah.
only thing that keeps me going. And so it's like, but I
Mhm.
think that part is so important, like it's like, because you don't want to lose with all this nihilist talk that we're talking about, you don't want to lose that because I think then I don't know what happens. I don't know. What do you think? I don't know what happens then. You'll be truly
Well,
liberated, but you have
I
to
think
make sure
it's
you don't kill yourself
right.
because you don't want to. Honestly, I mean, okay, all philosophy aside, like honestly, uh, it sucks. Like, I mean, it does really suck if you kill yourself.
Oh
Like,
yeah, no, I mean it's
like
incredibly.
and not even rationally like we did rationally it didn't, but it just does a disservice to like just this cool little thing you have for a little bit. I don't know,
Yeah, and I'm always like, dude, you only have like 100 years here.
yeah,
Like, it's like, why would you end that early?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like yeah, it's suffering, but it's also like Okay, so like the way I think about it is like life. I feel like so often is fully experienced when you can get like two dichotomies of things. So like I think so much like the only time you choose to live is like when you really contemplate the idea of like suicide. Like you really contemplate, hey, why shouldn't I kill myself? And it's a really, really dark and really, really scary and really, really dark road. And maybe you go down like maybe I should, and maybe you sit in that place a little bit. But when you answer that question of why shouldn't I, and you get that good question, that's like the first day where you start to live.
Yeah, you
That's the
choose
first
to
day where
live.
you have chosen life. People are like, I would die for you. It's like, what about living from it? Like, what about, oh, like I would die for this. Like, what about living for this? Like, I
Mm,
am living for these things. And at the end of the day, it's like life is so much suffering. Like it is so much pain. And like
the
like
hardest
for
thing you can
me,
do is live.
the hardest thing to do is definitely living. And at least the way I think about it is like suffering only ceases to be suffering once it has meaning, right? Then it becomes something else. And like if we like a big part of what I want my life to be, like definitely is like making this suffering for other people at least a little bit more meaningful to deal with. Like I'm not even going to say
Mm,
easier because I don't know if it
easier,
should be
yeah.
easier, but it at least should make sense. It should at least fit in the picture. It should at least through understanding it and making it make sense, like you are able to make it the pain of it a little less. And that I think is a very important thing to do. But I also think avoiding that question is also can be really dangerous because then you don't really know why you're alive. And like
Yeah.
that's also like a really empty life. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, suicide is a very serious issue, and you know if that's something anybody who could be dealing with that, or us even in the future dealing with that, listening to this, you know, I just it's crazy because I actually very recently was talking with a friend who was trying to help another friend deal with their own
Mm,
suicidal ideations, and they're pretty far along in it. You know that feeling of not wanting to be here anymore, and you know I think something that is so important to remember is that like a lot of the times we don't really want us to end. Like we just want what's going on around us, feelings, thoughts, events to end, and we want them to change. So I think it's important to keep in mind that like we have the power to change so much in our lives. Like we
yeah.
really, really, really do. Like we're not powerless. Like I feel like suicide is the sort of like we almost is like it's like I feel powerless towards these event things. Like the power that I have is I can take my own life, and it's like
Yeah.
you also have the power to change your own life in so many
I,
ways.
I have a question for you. I think I personally really don't like it when people say like things will get better. I just think that's a lie.
Mm,
Like it doesn't have to get better, it can get worse.
mm,
Like I mean, if what you're talking about is your external state, like things can
mm,
always get worse. It's never like you're at the bottom, like
mm,
I
mm,
think Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl does a phenomenal job of explaining that. Like
mm,
even in these Holocaust, even in the concentration camps, there were people who had better lives than the people who had worse lives.
mm,
And so even there was the entire spectrum of people who felt a little bit of joy and people who felt a lot of pain. It wasn't just like everyone was just suffering all 24/7. And so it's like as soon
mm,
as you adapt, which takes a couple weeks, months, years, you adapt to your situation, then you start feeling the entire rotation of emotions again. So like I think like telling people that, oh, like don't you like things will get better is kind of like a lie. And so it's more
mm,
just like you don't know how things outside of you will be, but
mm,
like again, back to the meditation stuff, all you can really focus on is internal. And like that's what you have control of, like how you
mm,
respond like internally to something. You really
mm,
have no control. I mean, you have very minimal control of what happens outside. There's too many factors playing into it, right? What do you
mm,
think?
mm, mm. No, I mean, I think that um, the idea that you can change the way you think about things more than you can change like the external reality is is real. And I think you know what that book also points out so much is that like I feel like a lot of times when I have felt suicidal in my life, there has simultaneously been a huge lack of meaning there.
Mm,
I just didn't really feel like any of this was worth it. And so then the task becomes how do you make this worth it? And obviously the drive to do that is like non-existent. I think that's really the hard part, and that's something you really have to focus on. But I think saying that things can get better is in a lot of ways dismissive, but I also think that um, it's also when you say like I can, you can change your response to things, you can change your view of things, like in a way that is also saying that like you can make your response, your view of things like better, like in such that the suffering isn't so overwhelming, I suppose.
Yeah.
Um, 'Cause I think that's just what it is. But it's a hard topic, man, and at the end of the day, like um, it's so hard to talk about because everyone's own suffering is just so individualized to them. I think
Yeah.
one of the hardest things you could do is like walk someone through why they shouldn't do that, and that's like it's such an
Yeah. You
individualized journey. Maybe that's
can't.
why it's so scary.
Yeah. Like spiritual
Exactly.
journeys are just so like, I think I like as I'm getting older, I'm just realizing like everyone's in different places. And like when people, we can have intellectual conversations, but when it comes to like something that's more like, really fundamental to your own beliefs on things, like we can talk
Mhm.
about like, oh, like the economy is like this, blah, blah, blah. That's like very like, there are connections to who you really are in those conversations if you really look at it. But for the most part, it's kind of like, oh, here are my ideas, but this is who I am. There's like a separation. But when we
Mhm.
get to like core principles of like who the ideas and behaviors and philosophies that make you who you are, I feel like there's so many experiences and stories. Like both of us have not come to what we think of today in like 5 days. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It has taken years and years of reflection and sitting on. And we're only, in our 20s. Like think about how many years, if we make it to 50, 60, that our thoughts and ideas would have been sat on. And it's like you
Mhm.
can't really just be like, hey, well, I'm dropping this piece to you that has taken me 40 years to develop in one
Mhm.
day, and so it's like all you can really do, and this is another big education thing, is like you can't give people the answers, but you can give them the tools to which they have to explore the world with. Like
Absolutely.
there's no, I can't tell you the wisdom because that then you just know it, which is what we're talking about this whole time. It's like I can know the right things to say. I know all the wisdom, but do I experience it? Do I live it? No. And so it's like
Mhm.
that takes time and real practice of the wisdom, like of the knowledge into your life, making it
Mhm.
wisdom,
Yeah, no, that's real. That's super real.
because we
And
know
and
we know all the right things. Like I feel like we know the words and the phrases and sayings to get us out intellectually through things,
mm,
but like the
mhm,
practice I think is like what will come in the near
mm,
future, hopefully.
mhm. I think that's real, and I think framing life in a way that isn't overly rosy is extremely important too. Like I feel like growing up, you really believe that like the purpose of life is to be happy, and
Yeah.
like like I just think reframe, like it's very important as you get older to reframe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, reframe that because it's clearly fucking not.
Yeah, and I
And
and I have found that
yeah,
the people who believe that to be usually the saddest.
the most miserable
Yeah.
because then there's always something wrong.
Yeah.
Like like so much of life is like what you say it is, right? And so like if you're always telling yourself like there's this thing I'm supposed to have, I don't have it all the time because who the fuck does? Like I'm always miserable. Like
Yeah.
no, like reframing life, I think is extremely important. Like understand like I don't think that it is what it is about. Like I think understand that life is going to have a fuck ton of suffering and like expecting that,
Yeah,
like
just
I think that's
expecting it.
fucking huge
Yeah.
as well. Not being like, oh, I can't do anything about it, but just genuinely being like, yeah, this is really a big part of the deal.
And so one of the practices in the meditation was it's easy to, and I know this really from my life experience, whatever we're saying right now, I'm saying it because I'm healthy and my life's pretty good right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say these same things when you're currently in the process of deep suffering, and I think like
Mm-hmm.
that's like, and that's like what one of the main things in the meditation was. It's like every Nietzsche, which means like everything is impermanent, is just like
Mm-hmm.
don't, it's easier to say it when things are going well, but you have to keep that same mindset when things are going poorly as well, like on both sides.
Yeah, and I think that's why having a principle that is truly universal is something that is really, really powerful. Like, something that I try to really think about too, which, remember hearing from this like story, is the concept of this too shall pass,
Yeah.
which I think like came from Christianity. But like I think it's just another way of saying a Nietzsche or impermanence because it is something that you heard that story about like the Roman emperor with like the phrase he wanted to work when it was good, he wanted to work when it was bad. one of like a
Mm,
phrase that about be able to do things like when something bad is happening, like this too shall pass. And then
mm,
he's like win some war. He's like being like lifted in a parade, and the people tell him, hey, apply this now as well. And it
mm.
was even in the great things like this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Like having that understanding of impermanence in everything we do. And so it seems like to really, really bring things full fucking circle, being present seems to be a really important
Yeah.
part of
Like
all of it.
aware, oh, and not just present, because what they were saying is you have to develop the tools to actually be aware. Like you're not just like you don't just have those tools, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's like really something that I was like, because in those 10 days you become so much more attuned to these subtle sensations that I completely, and now I cannot feel at all. I meditate an hour in the morning, I feel none of those feelings, like I've
Wow.
lost the practice and the fine tuning, all this external stimulation.
So that
I cannot.
environment is huge,
Huge.
like huge.
Yeah. Like the city, if you're really trying to live this life that we're talking about, it's not the city. It's just not. It's like
Mm-hmm.
100% not the city. Like this is literally it's like stimulation overload. Like you just can't. Your brain just is not meant to function like this.
Damn. I wonder if it makes me think about how, so many people who are great sort of like when they retire do tend to become like farmers or like Daniel Day-Lewis when he retired from acting, like moved to Italy and just became like a shoe cobbler. Like that's like he just literally like repaired shoes like for like 6, 7 years. Like that's all he did is like maybe like I think maybe the movement of life really is going from simplicity to this extreme complexity to understand the simplicity more and then moving back to the simplicity.
Yeah. 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 Like I mean, yeah, I think a lot about that for like kids of monks, for example. Like I don't know if their lives are necessarily better if all they've ever experienced is simplicity.
Exactly.
But maybe it
Yeah,
is, but
you have
maybe
to go through the
maybe that's
complexity.
just a worldview that I hold to justify why I'm going through high levels of complexity. So I don't know if it's true.
Let me ask you a question that I've been wanting to ask since we started this podcast, uh, the episode. Um, this is something I hear a lot, and I'm curious what your perspective on it is. So, like, people talk about being present all the time, and people say that the past is a thief and the future is a thief of joy. What do you think the value of being present in itself is?
It's a good question.
Why is that better than not being present? Why not be in my past? Why not be in my future? Why be in the present? Like, why does that matter?
That's a good question. I have no idea. I mean, yeah, because I'm always in the past or future. I'm never in the present. Because I mean, I feel like I consider myself someone who enjoys thinking, and that's just simply as a way to escape the present. It's a world in which I can just explore. So I don't know why the present is better. What do you
Like, is
think?
it because it feels better? Like, I feel like a lot of times when I'm present, like I feel good. Like, I feel like I'm able to notice more around me. I feel like one of the reasons why I think being present is like important is because like it slows things down. But I just think that's like
Yeah,
me like trying to escape my fear of death. So it's like I don't know if that's like,
that's
yeah,
true.
like
That's a good
the
point.
day
Yeah,
feels longer. But then I'm like, like the only reason I would honestly want to do that is because I don't want to die. If you don't really want to die, like, are you really present? Like, I don't know.
that's a good question. Like, yeah, I mean, I've never, ever, ever thought. I just always have run with the assumption that being present is better. I've never actually questioned why.
Hmm.
Well, I would say for me, being in my head doesn't make me feel like good. Like I definitely do feel better when I'm present. Um, but not better as in like I feel happier, but better as in I just feel my feelings. That's what I mean. Like I feel all my feelings, but I don't know.
Well, I wonder if like when I think about Buddhism, like I think about this kind of idea, like Buddhism says like all life is suffering, and suffering is kind of a bad thing in a way. But like they don't like from how I've heard it at least is like not all suffering is like bad. Like a lot of suffering is like necessary. So like there's like different types of suffering. There's like the suffering of like say you're in a car and you get hit by another car that comes on. There's the suffering of the pain that you will feel in that moment. Like that's like inevitable. Like that's gonna happen. Like
Yeah.
that it really really sucks. And some monks probably can overcome that shit as well. Um, and then there's like the suffering of like having to deal with all the things that come out of that. But then there's having that happen and thinking about it all the time.
Yeah. They
being
say
scared of it all the
the
time,
two
being
words that they
passive,
used is craving and aversion.
craving an aversion. Mhm.
Like is what I heard. Like to what you're saying. Like anytime you're craving a different state or you're trying to run away from a previous state, that's like where their definition of suffering comes, not from the true pain.
Right, right. And I've heard that described as like the suffering of suffering. And so maybe like the goal of life is trying to reduce that type of suffering. And maybe the only way to reduce that type of suffering is to be in the moment. Because if you're in the past, then a lot of times we're either suffering because we're thinking about something that was better then than it is now, or we're thinking about something that was worse than that we don't want to happen now, right? So like you said, craving and aversion, or yeah, for in the future, we're trying to like plan for like, and so maybe like the goal of being present really is to eliminate that suffering that comes from constantly thinking about suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. Nailed it on the head. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, what do we do now? That's like, I just don't know what to do. Like, I'm in a place in my life where I'm just like,
We
I
just go look at a tree for like 30 minutes.
yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, like you just have to, yeah, you just have to get out the house and just like live, I think.
I think it's crazy though, because I'm going to say all this and then work on like my grad school application for like 2 hours.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm like, this conversation, I know what I'm gonna do after and before this conversation is the same thing as if this conversation never
Yeah,
happened.
yeah.
So like, what was the point?
Maybe there was no point.
Yeah, it was just like fun. Yeah, like yeah.
Maybe the
Then like,
point
why
is
don't we
just to
just
not have
stay
a
in this
point.
conversation forever? Why ever leave it? Like forever just talk to each other until we die of hunger.
It wouldn't be bad, honestly.
Yeah, like,
I
like,
could do that. I actually think
like
I would pretty lit.
damn, like is that like man, like what are we doing? Like, oh, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm surrounded by a bunch of people who also have less idea of what they're doing. Everyone's just blind walking into each other, going dung dung dung. Hey, who sees? Like, what are we doing, man? What the fuck are we doing?
Oh man, for
Who ends the answers? Does no one have the answer? Like we're all just lost as hell.
not Sway. I know Sway don't. I'll say that much. He ain't got the answers. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's an answer. Maybe another one of the reframing is like to think that there are answers. Like
Yeah. Like, should
to
we just
think that
not be
there's anything else
searching?
that we should be doing.
Yeah.
Maybe
Like,
like just whatever you're doing, just like maybe like there's a lot of steps you can take to things, but it's just like maybe whatever you're doing, if you can just enjoy that.
yeah, just do it. Just do it to the max.
Like, yeah, if
Yeah.
you're gonna like work on your grad school applications, like just
Full
do it and
send.
like
Full
enjoy it. Yeah.
send. Like, just you don't need 10 other stimulation. Just only focus on that. Yeah, that's what I've learned from that thing. You're making your bed. Don't think about brushing your teeth. Make the hell out of your bed. Like
Mhm.
you think about brushing your teeth, make sure you get every little corner of your teeth. That's it. That's all there is to it.
I will say that I think there's a lot of like in the moment suffering that happens in life, but I think like this suffering I think I'm terrified of is like the suffering of like being 80 and looking back and being like, what happened?
Hmm.
Because I feel
Do you
like
feel
I
like
have that.
that would happen?
I think it could, man, because I think there's a lot of times where I look back on my life now and I'm like, damn, like where was I this year? Or what was I doing then? Or like, man, I
Hmm.
went on that vacation and like, fuck, like I don't remember most of it. Like I don't feel like I was there. Like I have like the times in which I really remember the most are like the times in like which I've really been present. Like I have like a really, really clear memory of me like laying in this hammock in Costa Rica, like looking at a tree literally for like 30 minutes.
Hmm.
Like more than I remember like, eating the best dinner I had there. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Yeah. I don't have that specific. I'm extremely afraid of dying. Like
Mm.
terrified, but I'm not afraid of like regretting my life because I'm like, I think I'm full sending some of it. Like not
Mm.
enough, but I think Arden really is for me was a great just role model in that. I feel like she really full sends her life in many ways. And I'm like, damn, like if
Mm.
I didn't meet her, I don't know if I would have ever like I would be so different if I didn't meet Arden. Like I feel like she really full sends life.
Mm.
I'm
So
like
for the listeners here today, what does it mean a full stem life?
like just like just do it, you know, like literally Nike's slogan, like all those things that you want to do. You want to do that stand-up comedy, you want to like swim in the ocean, you want to like scuba dive with dolphins, like you want to go to witness the Amazon, you want to go sit in front of the pyramids, like not to show other people, but like truly, like if you lived alone on this planet and like you can do whatever, like what would you do? You know, like if take a week and draw that life out and then like just go try your best to do it and then just go do, and then it's not going to make you happier, but just go do it. Like
Mm,
don't do those things because you're like, oh, vacationing or traveling makes me so happy. Like it probably won't, but just experience it, you know, like
mm,
all of it, the depths of it, like feel sadness and feel happiness and feel all the feelings and just like see the world and people and just there's just so much out there, you know.
mm.
That's what
So
full to
maybe
me,
like
that's what full send means.
that was beautiful. Um, so maybe like in relation to what we were talking about earlier with creativity, kind of in life and art, like maybe life is one big canvas, and like you should really paint it how you want to paint it. Like you want to
Yes.
paint whatever you want to paint. Like, and
Yeah.
you shouldn't be afraid to. Like, oh, people are gonna look at my painting and think it's dumb. Like, okay,
Yeah.
maybe the painting looks like everyone else's. Like, is that better? Like,
Yeah. And a lot of people are afraid to even, you know, like put their own pen, you know, like really like people are afraid, man. Like people are
I'm
really,
afraid
really
to do that.
afraid.
I'm like one of those people. Even though I talk about it a lot, like I'm actually like really scared of being judged all the time. I'm like pretty bad at like I always really admire like when you can like go out and like dance in front of people and like do stupid things and like or talk to strangers and like I want to be there a lot more. But I'm pretty like someone who's very like who chokes on their like social anxiety pretty often. Like it's weird. Like intellectually, I actually really don't care about being judged. Like I don't think it matters. Like someone's like, oh, you look like that. I don't care. But my body, my like
Mm,
physiology almost cares a lot more about that than I do. Like when I'm in certain situations, I feel like I just can't move. Like I'm literally like, hey, someone thinks you're dumb when you dance. Like who gives a fuck? But like it's so much more than just overriding your thinking. Like it's crazy. Like it's like it has to
mm.
be a lot of practice and a lot of you like understanding that whatever physiological sensations you have in that moment that tell you that you're not safe, like you have to reinforce that you are safe. Like
Yeah.
safe to make whatever decision you want in that moment and be all right.
And I would say like something that I try to do is like, you know, every feeling is a natural feeling, but then how we like think to respond to it is typically socially constructed. So it's like when you feel that feeling of like anxiousness, like I think everyone feels that. I feel that
Mm,
all the time. But it's like what meaning you place on that feeling, I think, is different from person to person. So like when someone feels fear, for example, if I felt fear in a fight, it would be the same fear that someone else would feel, but I would respond to it differently because I don't really know what to do in that situation. While someone who's trained, even though they may have felt the same fear, knows what to do in that
mm,
situation or would know be better prepared. And I would say like that social anxiety fear, like I think everyone feels that, but some people just like use, I love looking at that as like a, whenever I feel social anxiety, I'm like that's a sign I should go do it, because I'm like there's going to be
mm,
something cool on the other side of that. And so every time I feel
mm,
that, I'm like now I have to. So if I ever like
mm,
see someone I want to talk to and like, and then I'm just like, I don't really want to, but I don't feel that social fear, then I'm like, okay, that's okay. You made the rational choice to not go do it. But if I don't do it because I feel that social fear, then I'm like, I have, now I don't even have an option. I have to go
mm,
do it. And like I feel like if you start with the small baby ones, eventually, I mean, I can't do the big ones yet. I mean, I feel like for example, I'm really afraid of animals, like a lot of them. And so one day I want to eventually be able to be in the forest and like have animals just all around me and not like be scared of like, you know, I'm
mm,
pretty terrified of animals. So there's a lot, there's different ones that I think everyone's afraid of. And so,
mm.
but you have to like break through them, you know, because it's like, who knows what's there. But
And would you say
yeah,
most of the time when you do break through that, like it's a positive outcome?
yeah, I don't think I've ever had a negative one, you know, and it's like
Damn, that's crazy.
you get rejected, but it's like, who cares? Like, I am so happy that I did it. Like, I don't even care how the outcome is most of the time. Like, I'm so proud of myself that I did it. I'm like, I don't care how it turned out.
It's crazy how like egotistic and faith oriented like anxiety is.
Yeah.
Like so many people like are like, oh, like like I'm I'm advanced. Like I'm a person of science. Like I can't believe in like a
Yeah. I
god.
can't
Like nah,
fail. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't believe in like a god. Like nah, that's crazy. That's insane. But like I can believe that like if I were to go do, I can believe for 10 years that if I were to go talk to these people, they would hate me. Like those are
Mm,
maybe equally as irrational. Like I don't know.
yeah.
They're both pretty fucking irrational. And it's also like you're just assuming that you know when
What will
you don't
happen?
even do it. Or maybe you
Yeah.
had it happen one fucking time and you just turn that
Yeah.
into like reality. Like that is so like that's so neurotic. It's insane. And like the fact that we make that reality, like to the point which we're just like, no, like this person will, I will, these people will judge me in this way if I go do this. Like, so I cannot.
Yeah.
That's insane. Like,
Yeah.
when I think that I think those things, I'm just like, damn, that's wild.
I think, yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Like the faith, like, yeah, that's an interesting point of bringing faith into that. Yeah, because it does take a lot of belief to be like, I know exactly how this will turn out when I go do it.
It's a fuck ton.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of times, even if it does happen exactly the way you thought it does, I think it also takes another level of like, I meet a lot of people in academia who are like this, who like have always gotten A's, who've always succeeded. They're like, I just like can't fail. If I fail, like it's like that's like you have to break that. I feel like if you really want
Yeah.
to go do things in your life, like you can't expect yourself to succeed. Like there's a billion things that you'll fail at just because you can't succeed at everything. So just like get used to failing. Like I think that's like something I mean, I feel like that's one thing I have gotten over for sure. I
Wow.
don't I expect myself to fail. Like I don't do things expecting to succeed. I'm like, look, what I do know is that if I do it 10 times, I'll be better than the first time. That I know 100%. But I know for a fact the first time I do anything, I'm gonna be ass. Like that's just what you should expect. You shouldn't be expect to be good at anything the first time.
And I feel like what you're saying is just laying down the foundations of the growth mindset. Like
Yeah.
genuinely, like really, like I feel like we talk about it as this like fucking pop culture term all the time, but like I don't think that. Like I really every time like I go do something, I'm like I need to be great at it, or like I'm not gonna. Like if I'm not great at this, like I am literally like my worth is less. Like like I am less valuable, and like to just really be like every time I'm gonna go do this, I'm gonna fail, not because I'm a failure, but just because I literally don't. I'm not gonna do this because I don't do it all the time. Like
Yeah.
and if I
Like that's
am
all
good at
that
it,
is.
that's just luck. Like
Yeah.
it's just that's just purely
It's
luck. Like,
just
it doesn't make me any better of a person.
yes.
That's just
And
pure
that's
luck.
like my whole thing with being smart and everything. I'm like, you've just done something enough times to be able to do it pretty well. You're not like smart, Like I hate when people use that definition of I did well on this test or whatever. It's like, no, you just seen it and done it enough like to do it again. And so
Yeah.
everybody's smart at what they've already done. And so it's like do more things and you'll be smarter at more things. Like, it's just like that's just all it is.
And if you are just like extremely smart, like you can just pick up things every single time and just get it off top. Like you don't even have to study for a test, like you can just fucking do it and just like through like having such insane awareness of like choice answer tests, let's say, you can just there are
Exactly.
people like that. They can literally
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so good at recognizing patterns on tests that they can get A's. And it's just like,
Yeah.
what do you do for that? Like,
Yeah. No,
it's like what did
I
you
think
like
people
do?
are
And
just
it's
like
luck.
from a young age, just like seen or done, experienced more of those things. I know there is like a like biological difference for sure, but I think like not considering that is helpful for like your own experience. Like if you're already like, oh, I'm limited by my biology, like you're just gonna do less things.
Yeah, yeah,
Like whether it's
sure.
like true or not, that's like I feel like less important than like what benefits your own experience of life.
It's important to have like as we were talking about narratives, like the narrative that we have about our life, about reality, right?
Yeah.
Is extremely important. Like I do think having like a narrative that is more oriented towards growth, even if it's like let's say a little false, I think is I say that's a good thing, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I do too.
Because we have a fuck ton of negative narratives,
Yeah,
Like why don't
so
we get to
many.
the positive ones that we're like, oh no, that's you're
Yeah,
lying to yourself. That's not
yeah,
true.
like
But we like all
that's
these
true.
negative
That's
narratives, we're
true.
like, oh I'm gonna keep those. So like that's all
Yeah,
good.
that's a good point. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah,
Like I'm ugly, I'm stupid, I'm this, but it's like, oh, the second someone's like, oh, well, like I'm gonna believe that like this is purely about like experience, like not like it's like nah, bro, that's cap. Like this is
yeah,
just like that's
that's
crazy.
funny.
One more thing I'm gonna say about this is really catching how often we validate our negative irrational beliefs, yet
Hmm.
invalidate our irrational positive beliefs.
Hmm. So my final
Yes, sir.
question for you is, what are we doing after we hang up this phone? I think that'll be helpful for me as well.
I'm going to the gym.
Nice. That'll be good. That's a good. Are you doing anything specific there?
Yeah, well, I'm recovering from this fucking
Yeah.
sprain, so like I'm trying to just kind of figure out what I can and can't do. I had like a dope realization with my like therapist the other day. It's kind of a scary realization, but it was a really really good one because I was just talking to her about just sort of how depressed and anxious I've been feeling. and we were just kind of talking about the things I like to do for fun. And they're all physical. It's like play sports, do yoga, meditate, go to the gym, do Muay Thai, whatever. Like it's all physical, and so much of that has been handicapped because of my wrist. Like I haven't really been able, like I can kind of do modified things in yoga, but I haven't really been able to do that. And so like for me, what that really tells me is like every day, or like I was talking about dancing, is like every day I need to have a part of my day that involves some type of physical stimulation, like something, because I actually like think I really, really, really enjoy that. I think it brings me a lot of happiness. Well, it also made me realize that if I ever lose my ability to physically express myself and stimulate myself, that sounds weird, then I'm probably gonna be very, very depressed. And so like it just almost like reinforced me, like, dude, I need to like really, really, really take care of my physical body, because physicality is extremely important to me. Like I love movement, because one thing that me and my therapist came to the conclusion is that so often when I was a kid, I felt frozen from fear. And so to me, like physical movement, physical expression is equivalent to freedom. And I was like, well, shit, that's fucking crazy. But regardless, I do really enjoy that. So something physical today for sure. I'm gonna go maybe dance later today. That's the thing. And I'm gonna just try and like override my like I care about what I look like thing and just dance. But also like think that preparation for anything is important. Like I think if I just maybe spend like 30 minutes and just like learn some like cool moves today, I'd also feel really excited to go do those moves.
That's I think what you just said right there, we should talk more about in another episode. I think that's maybe we can discuss ways in which we can prepare for specific interactions. Like that would be a really cool conversation, I think. Preparation
is broken, dude. Like I was looking at something that I was just talking about, like really successful people. One thing I was just talking about what they do more than anybody just prepare for shit. And I'm just like, yeah, if I just spent like an hour dancing today, like I would actually feel so much less scared to go dance. Like maybe we just literally spent time like just practicing, preparing, like feeling like we put work into things. And like, I don't know, maybe it would be easier. I don't know. So yeah, going to the gym. What about you, bro?
So I'm practicing a Nietzsche. So I was going to go to an open mic today at 9. And I had a poem that I had sketched out yesterday, and I really wanted to clean it up so I can present it today. I didn't clean it up, so I'm not gonna present it today because I don't want to rush through it. But it's karaoke as well, so I'm gonna sing. I'm really excited.
You're gonna go sing to a bunch of people?
Yeah.
So I fucking love you, dude. That is like I literally am like. Sometimes I love talking to people when I feel like they have something I don't, and like I just, as of right now, do not have the ability to overcome. I don't have the courage to overcome my fear and go sing in front of a bunch of people. Like I want to get to that point in time, but as of right now I don't have that. And so that's just one of the reasons I love talking to you, because you do shit like that. And honestly, like that's just dope as fuck. Some people that might not be crazy at all. Like it's like, I'm gonna go see fun karaoke with some like random people and like cool. To me, I think that's dope as shit. I'm not down to go do that. Like
I appreciate that. I think thank you. I think another part of it is just like a survival mechanism. If you're around a bunch of friends, you have people, it's like you just go invite them. I don't really have a lot of friends here. If I don't actually go do things myself, I'm gonna just lay in my bed. And so it's more like not really like necessarily like I chose, but it's like I just had to do it for so long that now it's just easy because I don't. But
most people would rather lay in their bed. Like most people would really rather lay in their bed. Like I really don't think I'm off the marker when I would say that most people would rather lay in their bed than go sing karaoke by themselves to a bunch of random people. So it's so much more than that. Like it's so much more than just a survival mechanism. Like it's a living mechanism, I would say.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. So I'm excited. I haven't, so I'm going to work on this poem tomorrow. I'm going to a jazz concert and then I'm going to sit there, work on this poem. I'll share it to you. I'm really excited.
What are you singing?
I want to sing American Boy. I really like singing that song because I feel like people get hyped to it too. Oh yeah, which part? Let me put. I'm more embarrassed to do it here than I am there. That's not funny.
Just give us a little 10-second snippet.
Okay. All right. Oh my God. All right. 3. You gotta do the 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. Take me on a trip I'd like to go
Go
someday.
somewhere.
Take me on a trip I'd like to see you. I really want to come kick it with you.
Way
You'll be
too.
my American boy,
My what?
American boy. Da 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 yeah. Da 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 yeah. Da, da. Yeah, I'm hyped.
Let's get it. Well, man, I fucking wish I was there to see you tonight, but I know you're gonna kill it.
Yeah, this was a good conversation. I needed it. Thanks.
All right, brother. Hell yeah, brother. Let's go create some meaning.
Well, thank you all for listening to another episode of Two Birds, One Cock.
I love you, Mom.
All right.
What a great job.